Okay, this is going to be a screen recording of a screen recording since we finally figured out how to use the microphone with the screen recorder. And the title of this video is The True Framework of Human Entropy, the Aging Process, Death, and Immortality. The linguistic foundation of religion, dualism, sophistry, and logical fallacies. The source for lig, the 1828 Webster's Dictionary. The word, preschool level word, 3 letters, LIG, with a preschool level definition, 5 total letters, 2 LIE, to lie. So the word lig, the root word of religion, means to lie. And the morphological formula is RE, again in anew, plus LIG, to lie, plus ION, the suffix, a process, which gives us a process to lie, again in anew. The reality, religion, RE, LIG, ION, dualism, sophistry, and logical fallacies are all, by definition, a process to lie anew and again, and therefore religion. Language, science, and the separation. Language is the ultimate expression of dualism, which is sophistry, which is religion. Science is just a word, which means it is an absolute part of language, and it is the cutting. The root of the word science traces the Latin scindere and the Proto-Indo-European ski, meaning to cut, split, or separate. And the suffix, the ens, is the essence. So what science does is cut the essence of nature into countless little pieces. The false separation. By using language and science as a part of language, the mind lies by claiming that things are separate when they are not. It takes nature, the all, which is a single, unbroken, interconnected web of energy, and chops it into a plethora of little pieces that do not exist within nature. Nature, the all, has no separate parts. The exact moment you use language and its cutting tool, science, to label something, you engage in the lying of RE, LIG, ION, by declaring it separate from nature, the all. The connection to slavery, the formula, bond, to bind, plus the suffix age, a state or process of, gives you bondage, a process of continual slavery. The maxim, the truth sets you free. The function, withholding the truth through religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and language, which include the false chopping of science, is how continual bondage is maintained. The neurological split, the trigger, the conscious mind accepts religion, dualism, sophistry, a process to lie anew and again, and the language with its cutting tool of science. The outcome, the brain is forced to process the artificial, impossible pieces created by the lying of language and the chopping of science. The physical impact, per the 1983 CIA Gateway Process Report, the analytical left and holistic right hemispheres are pulled out of phase or fragmented or separated. The consequence, accepting religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the false separations or a process to lie anew and again of language and science creates destructive electrical and psychological friction because it tries to divide the invisible web of energy. The path to entropy, aging, and death. Mental friction from religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the cutting of language and science overrides the innate homeostatic healing mechanisms of the body. The decay. This ongoing internal conflict triggers cellular entropy. The symptom, internal entropy, is what mainstream science mislabels as the aging process. The endpoint, total accumulated decay, leads directly to physical death. Biblical symbolism, the root of the knowledge of death, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the symbol of division. This tree represents the introduction of opposites and the cutting tool of science within language. The false framework, eating the fruit, represents the conscious mind accepting religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the artificial separations of language and science. The penalty, of which there is none. We're doing it all to ourselves. By using the cutting of language and science to chop nature, the all, into a plethora of parts that do not exist within nature, you separate your mind from the truth. Your hemispheres fall out of phase, producing the internal friction that drives physical decay. The tree of life, the symbol of the singularity. This tree represents absolute unity, nature, the all, truth, and the single interconnected web of energy with no separate parts. The non-dual state, it contains no opposites, no cutting of language and science, and no artificial labels. It represents hemispheric unity. The result, returning to the non-dual state, stops the process of cutting reality into pieces. It restores your unbroken homeostatic signals, allowing the human being to live eternally. The vibrational resonance of death without fallacy. The pre-established terminal frequency, the mental agreement, accepting religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the cutting of language and science, severs the mind's connection to nature, the all. The frequency shift. Instead of using mental energy for continuous homeostatic renewal, the brain transmits a frequency of fragmentation and disintegration. The ultimate goal. Because the conscious mind uses the cutting of language and science to divide the self, it sets death as its ultimate goal and functions on a destructive vibrational baseline. Attracting the physical event, vibrational resonance. The body matches its eternal mental output with the surrounding environment. The event magnet, when the mind is tuned to the frequency of death, it pulls in destructive physical events to fulfill the internal terminal state. This exact resonance explains how a person is shot by a gun, eaten by a lion, bitten by a snake, or hit by a bus. These traumatic events are drawn into the physical experience because the mind used the cutting of language and science to chop the interconnected web of energy into a plethora of little pieces. Aging versus sudden death. Aging process, long-term cellular decay. It is driven by chronic hemispheric friction from religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the cutting of language and science, causing the slow failure of homeostatic repair signals. Sudden trauma, immediate physical destruction. This occurs when the body's rapid alignment with the frequency of destruction immediately pulls in the physical events of being shot by a gun, eaten by a lion, bitten by a snake, or hit by a bus, etc., etc. The only true path to eternal life. The requirement, complete elimination of falsehood. You must completely reject religion, dualism, sophistry, logical fallacies, and the cutting tools of language and science. Dissolving labels. You must cease using language to place artificial labels on nature. The all, refusing to split the single unbroken interconnected web of energy into artificial parts. The mechanics, establishing hemispheric unity. You physically restore absolute hemispheric unity in the brain. Terminating friction. By ending the inner conflict of opposing and fragmented thoughts, you'll eliminate all electrical resistance, mental noise, and destructive interference between the analytical left and holistic right hemispheres. The result, restoration of coherence. The brain's electromagnetic field becomes entirely coherent. Zero entropy. The internal mental noise drops to zero, terminating the physical stress response and halting the cellular entropy that drives biological aging. The final state, unbroken regeneration. The body defaults to its innate native program of pure homeostatic renewal. Eternal life. With the signal restored and unhindered by mental conflict, cells continually regenerate without errors or decay, allowing the human being to live eternally. So, nature is the living one. Cells are the biological building blocks of life. All living organisms are comprised of cells. Human beings are multicellular organisms. That means we are all cells of nature, this one living organism. Nature is one giant living body that is always breathing. The so-called Schumann resonance, or electromagnetic waves, are always there. It is the breath. Human beings are all part of nature's body, just like the cells inside you are part of your body. The separation occurs when we speak separation by labeling things that exist as one within nature. For example, you and I, us and them, this and that. This triggers an actual separation of the brain hemispheres, which causes friction resulting in entropy. The language is the wedge that's driven between the brain hemispheres by RE-LIG-ION. In the microcosm, when cells sense they can no longer maintain homeostasis, a self-destruct sequence called apoptosis occurs, and the cell dies in order to protect the rest of the body. This ensures that malfunctioning cells are removed before they can cause disease and kill the entire organism. In the macrocosm, when the multicellular human being becomes too fragmented and riddled with disorder, the brain signals the body to die in order to protect the health of the larger ecosystem, nature, the eternal living one. When the brain triggers that exit, it stops the lie of the individual and returns that energy to the truth of the constant breath, the electromagnetic coil under the earth. Appreciate your time and attention.